Lunalights have been one of my signature decks for over 6 years now, and it is time to play it in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, but with a twist. Konami has announced their new normal slash rare event, and now I want to play Lunalights because it's a lot of fun and I think it's a little bit underrated. This deck does not have its Leo Dancer and its Panther Dancer, but do not underestimate Lunalight Cat Dancer because this card is pretty bonkers. It basically lets you attack your opponent's monsters twice, and if they have a 0 attack monster with one of the Lunalight cards I'll get into in a bit, it could pretty much be OTK, especially if your opponent has a lot of monsters on the field. So this card is also good because it is a stall card because it cannot be destroyed by battle, which is pretty cool. But yeah, let's get on to the deck and I'll kind of talk about everything. So the first cards are your level 2 monsters. It's your Black Sheep and your White Rabbit. These cards are very good for recursion. This Lunalight Black Sheep is good for not only adding a Lunalight from your graveyard to your hand, it can also add a polymerization from your deck to your hand, and if it's used as fusion material, you can add back a Lunalight monster that is in the extra deck or in the graveyard to your hand. The White Rabbit is very good because it's a monster reborn for any of your Lunalights, and then you can once per turn target spawn trap cards on your opponent's side of the field up to the number of Lunalight cards you control and return it to hand, except for the White Rabbit obviously. So if you have other Lunalight monsters besides the White Rabbit, you can return spawn trap cards to their hand. So it's kind of like a mini giant tornado. It's very decent. And then you have your one level 3, which is your Purple Butterfly. This card is very good for the attack boost. It gives 1,000 attack to one of your Lunalight monsters, and if it's in your graveyard, you can banish it from your graveyard and then special summon a Lunalight from your hand, which is very good for some rank 4 plays. It can also get out something like the Blue Cat, the special summon. It has a very good effect, which is doubling the attack of one of your Lunalight monsters on the field, which is very good. This card is very strong for OTKs with the Cat Dancer because it can attack over monsters twice, as I said before. The Crimson Fox is very good because it can make a monster go from 0, or it can make a monster go to 0 attack until the end of the turn, which is like very good if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect. And then in the graveyard, if one of your cards are targeted or your Lunalight monsters are targeted, you can banish it from the graveyard and then negate the activation of that effect, and then each player gains 1,000 life points, which is very good for when your opponent like Canadia is one of your Lunalight monsters, even though it doesn't really matter, or they try to target and banish it or something like that. You can negate it with the Crimson Fox, which is very good. The Collider Chick is very strong, not as strong in this format because we don't have stuff like Leo Dancer and Panther Dancer, but it's still really good for getting your Martin into the graveyard because you can send any Lunalight monster from your extra deck or your deck to the graveyard and then copy the name, which is like very strong. It is really good to get like any of these cards in the graveyard if you really need to. Like if you have a perfume in your hand, you can like send a Blue Cat and then, you know, summon it from the graveyard and then double the attack of one of your Lunalights, which is like very strong. So I do like the Collider Chick still. It's still a very powerful card, and especially in this build it has a different purpose because in the TCG you don't really play polymerization, but in this build, because you're playing polymerization, you can recycle back your polymerization if you send this card to the graveyard by a card effect. So it's very good for that as well. And then when it's banished, it can stop any card effects your opponent has during the battle phase. So if they have like Battle Fader or they have the Speedrun Menko card, like anything like that, like they can't activate anything. So it's very good for that. And then the Emerald Guard is very good because it can draw a card by sending a Lunalight monster or a Lunalight card from your hand to the graveyard. So it's very good for that. And it can also recur a monster that is banished or in the graveyard when it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect. And then for the Yellow Martin, this card is very good in the TCG and the regular Master Duel format because you could be able to bounce your Lunalight Tiger and get the effect over and over again. But it is very good for returning your Wolf back to your hand to make more fusion plays. It could also return like a Crimson Fox to your hand and then send it to the graveyard with something like the Serenade Dance to get its effect. You could also do that with the Emerald Board as well. So it's very good for those situations. Also, when it's sent to the graveyard via a card effect, you can add a Lunalight Spawn Trap card from your deck to your hand. Now, if you're a Duel Links player, you know of Lunalight Fusion. If you're a TCG player, you know of Serenade Dance, but you don't really think of Lunalight Reincarnation Dance. You can add Lunalight Reincarnation Dance if you send a Yellow Martin to the graveyard by a card effect, and then if you have your monster be destroyed by battle or by card effect that you control, you can add up to 2 Lunalight monsters from your deck to your hand, and if the activation is negated, you can use it again. So that is really, really good. This card is pretty insane for Lunalights because in this format, it's not a very fast format. You're not gonna get OTK turn 1. So like setting up Blue Cat, setting this card, and then ending your turn, you can like net like a lot of advantage because when they try to destroy your Blue Cat, it floats into another monster, and then your reincarnation is gonna add you 2 Lunalight cards, so it can now generate you advantage, so you can get to stuff like your Black Sheep, which is very important to get your poly. Stuff like the Crimson Fox to lower your monster's attack to 0. So just any of your opponent Lunalight cards, you can just add it to your hand, which is very, very, very strong. And then the Wolf is basically your Miracle Fusion. You can put it in the scale, and then pretty much fusion for your Cat Dancer, and also do piercing if it's on the field. So any of your Lunalight monsters can just do piercing. So if they have a defense position monster and you just want to attack over it, you can go Leo Dancer, attack it twice, and do piercing. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So this card is very, very, very strong and very underrated for people that just don't know the monster effect. And then for the rest of the cards, the spell and trap cards, you have the Polymerization. Obviously, it's a fusion deck. The Lunalight Perfume, this card is very good, not only in Monster Reborn, but it's also a searcher by discarding a card, so very, very strong. And then the MST, this card is just a staple in everybody's deck pretty much. It's just the normal back removal you have in this format. Lunalight Reincarnation Dance, I just talked about this. And the Serenade Dance, it has a good, I wouldn't say good, it has a decent on-field effect in this type of format. You can special summon a token, or you can target a monster and have it gain 500 attack for each monster your opponent controls when you fusion summon a monster. So most of the time you're just gonna send it to the graveyard and then use the effect to send one card from your hand to the graveyard and then special summon a Lunalight from your deck. That is pretty much what you're gonna do with this card. A cool play that I'll do a lot with this type of deck is that I use MST to pop my own Serenade Dance if I'm in a bad scenario, so I can just get a Lunalight monster from my deck onto my field. So like a Kaleido Chick, or if I need Emerald Bird, I get Emerald Bird, or any of the other monsters. If I need to stall for a bit, I can get to Lunalight Blue Cat, which is very, very good. So MST has multiple purposes, and yeah, it's just really decent overall. And then for the extra deck, it's not really that important. I just put a lot of generic XYZs. Cat Dancer, obviously the boss monster, you need 3 of this, obviously. And then like I put some Link monsters that are kind of decent. I think Geonator Transverser, you need to play around this card. If you're summoning to the zones that Geonator Transverser points to, you're doing something wrong. You need to either summon this, I think, to the under both of the EMZs into the far right of your zone. I think to play around the Geonator Transverser. Otherwise, they're gonna steal your best monster, and that could be very, very bad. Cross Sheep is very good for any ritual or fusion deck. I mean, it's good. It's kind of decent in like Synchro XYZs, but being able to special summon 1 level 4 or lower monster from your graveyard is very, very good, especially to reborn something like the Blue Cat to double the attack of your fusion monster. So that is like super decent. The Rumadal, I mean, it's kind of decent. You can pop like, I don't know. It's just a generic like Link 2 you can make. I mean, it's not that good. I'd rather make like Cross Sheep if I'm gonna like go off, or a Geonator Transverser to kind of steal my opponent's monsters, if anything. And then even then, I would probably make a rank 4. All these rank 4s are pretty decent. There's not really any notable ones. Nightmare is like good going first. If you just want to first turn play, this is like really decent, I guess. Other ones are just for utility. This is your only level 2 or rank 2 XYZ. This card is very decent because it can change a monster to a 0 attack. So it can also be good in combination with the Cat Dancer. This card used to be super, super decent in like the earlier builds of Lunalights back in 2016. I used to play this a lot. And I think there's just, oh, Nyarla. Nyarla is very, very good because it can detach your monsters as effects. So it can trigger the Lunalight monsters. So what that means is, like, with the normal XYZ monsters, they detach before their effect resolves. But for Nyarla, it detaches as the effect is resolving. So the effect that says, you know, when this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, it triggers that effect normally. Like if you normally just like detach a Yellow Martin or any of the cards that say if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, they won't get their effects for normal XYZs that attach their materials as cost. So for Nyarla, it's very, very good because it can trigger your Yellow Martin, your Crimson Fox, your Emerald Bird to basically get their effects to either like special summon a card, change the monsters to 0, either like add a Lunalight Spell and Trap card from your deck to the graveyard, or add a Poly from your graveyard to your hand. So any of those effects can be triggered by the Nyarla effect. So if you don't understand, like basically Nyarla lets you activate all of these effects. So there's probably a couple of other decent ones. Malevolent Sin is very good for just removing a monster off of the board, but you probably won't want to do that unless you're in like a sticky situation, no pun intended. But the other one is the number 80. This can banish cards from your opponent's graveyard. So if they have something like really weird in their graveyard, you can just banish it with this card. I think that's all that's kind of important, I guess. Like Samurai can be very good for OTK. So if Cat Dancer is not enough to OTK your opponent, you could add a Gaga Samurai on top of that to do pretty much 38 more damage on the board. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deck profile. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to mention. You could probably replace the Speed Void Menko with the Battle Fader, but I do like Speed Void Menko in this deck because it's a level 4 and it lets you go for rank 4 plays. So that's why I'm playing this over Battle Fader. You can obviously use Battle Fader. I think some earlier builds of Lunalights back in like 2016 were playing this because they had a lore and it was pretty decent for that, but it's just not that good without a lore. Like if I had a lore, I guess it would be better, but I guess you still have link plays you can do. So maybe you can probably play Battle Fader over it, but I just like the access of having like a level 4 monster that can also be like a Battle Fader type of effect. So maybe after some testing I do with this deck, some more testing, I've done a little bit of testing with this deck, but maybe you could test out the Battle Fader. Maybe it's just good anyways because it's just, you know, you can just end your opponent's battle phase entirely. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I've rambled on long enough, and see you guys later. Peace.